Lori McNee is an artist, author, social media influencer, blogger, and art educator. She is the author of Fine Art Tips and the host of her own television show called Art Beat with Lori McNee. Her stunning landscape and wildlife paintings have been featured in numerous publications and galleries. Through her magnificent wildlife art and plein air studies, Lori reconnects the audience with the natural world, a world that inspires her, and a world that many people today find themselves separated from. Please welcome Lori McNee. Welcome to the show, Lori McNee. Really excited to have you on.
Thank you. Hi, Avery.
Yep. So we just had a bit of a recording issue where we began and then I realized we weren't recording. But here we are yet again, luckily, only about 10 minutes in. So let's begin yet again. All right, Lori. So the first question I pretty much ask all artists, and yet again, you're going to answer it for us.
That's fine.
Creativity. Has it always been something that has been important to you since childhood? Or is it something that kind of came into your life a little later on? Because this is an interesting question I ask all artists because it's just fascinating to know. Is art something that like after school they, became more infatuated with? Or was it something that from childhood they were just always drawing, always interested in creating? So that's the question.
Okay, I think that's a great question. And for as long as I can remember, I've been a creative person. And as soon as I could hold a crayon, I was always drawing and always drawn to birds and animals and nature. And the first 12 or so years of my life, I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I was exposed to going on really neat outings where we'd go pottery shard hunting and pick up little ancient pieces of the past where, these ancient artists created on pottery. And I'd look for petroglyphs and I loved that. And back then where we lived in Arizona, we lived on an old orange grove and they would flood the yard to water them instead of having sprinklers, and all the birds would flock to our yard. And I was just transfixed at a young age by these gorgeous birds that migrate to Arizona every winter. And I used to try and capture them. My parents told me this old wives' tale: you sprinkle salt on a bird's tail, it can't fly. I'd run around with a salt shaker. And one day my mom gave me paper and a pencil and said, why don't you try drawing the birds instead? So that's what I did. And I've been capturing birds on paper and with paint ever since. And I evolved into a wildlife artist as a young mom. I would paint during nap time and in between loads of laundry and work toward an art career. And now I'm an empty nester and I'm able to focus full time on it. But yes, art has been a big part of my life.
Yeah, so, and I can see that in your art, there's a lot of birds, a lot of animals, a lot of nature. So I think currently you live on a farm. As far as nature goes, how has that always been, a part of your life, and how has that influenced your work?
Well, so I was in Arizona and then we moved to California when I was in junior high. And I grew up there and went to college there and then moved to Idaho. But I always visited every summer and winter. My grandfather had a ranch in Colorado and we'd go out there and we're just out in the beautiful wilderness there. And so my love for nature really stemmed from that, and also the beautiful nature hikes my parents would take me on in Arizona and in California too. And we went on vacations often. We'd go to the state parks or the national parks. And so I've just always loved nature. And in our conversation prior, you mentioned that a lot of people have gotten away from nature.
Yes.
And I said, I totally agree with that. However, there's a big turn toward nature yet again.
Yeah.
With the pandemic that we've all been coming through, and people have gotten back to nature because of that for the fresh air, for the elbow room, just to get away from the cities, and also because we were not able to travel and get on airplanes. And so it's much easier to be able to get in your car, rent a trailer or buy an RV or whatever, and get back to nature. So the Mother Nature is definitely out there for everyone to enjoy more than ever.
Yeah. And where is it that you live?
So now I live in Sun Valley, Idaho. It's a beautiful ski resort. It's actually,
Yeah, it looks gorgeous.
it is. It's America's first ski resort, and I've been living there since 85.
Nice. And there are mountains there that are just absolutely gorgeous. I've seen some of your photography, and that place is just amazing.
It is.
To be able to be an artist who lives there, especially with plein air painting, which
Yes.
for people who do not know what plein air painting is, it's you are in nature and you're painting, and you're usually focusing on something to paint, but that's what plein air painting is for people who do not know. That must be so great to be able to immerse yourself in the nature and paint there.
It is. It's one of my favorite things to do. And plein air painting was coined by Monet and the French Impressionists, and it actually is a French phrase for painting in the fresh air. And they started plein air painting back in the 1800s, and they used little cigar boxes as their paint boxes. And now we have, we call them pochade boxes or paint boxes that we take out, set up, and have a view in front of us, and plein air paint. And it's kind of like what I have behind me. This is Yellowstone behind me.
Okay.
This painting behind me, but it's very rewarding. You're in the moment. You have to work quickly. In the studio, we're in charge. We get to play Mother Nature. Our lighting, we can control the light and everything, the weather inside our studio. But once you're outside, Mother Nature's in charge.
Yeah.
And so you have to work quickly because the lighting changes, there's bugs, the elements, everything. But it's a lot of fun, and it's a great discipline. And whether you are a realistic painter or not, it's an amazing way to see color and understand light and all of that. And it really is a benefit to any type of artist.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about the painting that's behind you right now?
Sure. This is from Yellowstone, and it's on the southern entry into Yellowstone. And there's this beautiful meadow. And I love the transitional times of day where there's a little bit more drama in the morning and the evening or late afternoon. And that's what this depicts. But I go to Yellowstone usually in the shoulder seasons because it's not as crowded. However, it is crowded all the time now. In fact, I've heard that it takes 2.5 hours just to even get into the entrance of Yellowstone now. And then it's bumper to bumper the full way. So it's worth it, but I would suggest going in September or right before it closes in October, or right when it opens up, early May.
Yeah. Going back to nature, I mean, what are the benefits? I mean, I know the benefits, of course, but what are the benefits to going outside, being immersed in the world of nature? People really need to get back to nature these days. And as you said, because of the pandemic, a lot of people have started, getting back to nature. But unfortunately, with the pandemic, there were lockdowns, and a lot of people ended up just isolating themselves from the world.
Yes.
And that wasn't healthy. Today, there's a lot of depression, suicide rates have gone up, and people really need to return to nature because that's where you're going to find happiness again. I don't know if there's anything you can expand a bit on why you should go out in nature, why you should paint in nature, plein air painting. Is there anything that you want to add to that?
Sure. I mean, so like I said, we moved, I was a young mother, moved in the 80s up to Sun Valley from San Diego, which is a wonderful place, beautiful place. but we kind of saw the writing on the wall back then that it was getting quite crowded and busy. And so we moved up basically to enjoy a winter, because we'd never lived in snow country. We'd visited, but we wanted to just see how it was. So at the time I was married and moved up there, and we loved winter so much that there's an old saying, the winters bring you and the summers keep you. And that is the best kept secret about up in the mountains, is the summer. You know, people think about the mountains for skiing, which is fabulous, but summer's just as rewarding. And nature, I mean, it's good for your blood pressure. It's good for your whole psyche. And I love the city. I still love to go visit. I love to travel. I love to go to cities around the world and go to good restaurants and go to shows and museums and all of that. And it's fabulous. But to live on a daily basis like that doesn't work for me. And it does for many people. But no matter what, it's important to get out and go to a garden, or go to a park and just be around the birds and nature and reconnect. And it's very grounding and calming and relaxing and healing, very healing. And there's a lot of studies about that.
Yeah.
But our family, in our previous interview, before we realized we weren't recording, I had mentioned that I sold my home in Sun Valley just this winter, and I'm going to be building a home up there. But meanwhile, I'm living 2 hours south of Sun Valley on our family farm. We bought 5 years ago a family farm where it's totally different. It's high desert down here. I'm in the Snake River Canyon. It's equally as beautiful in a very more arid way, and very hot. I didn't think I'd ever spend a summer here. It was 116 on my back deck last week.
Wow.
But it is beautiful. But we have chickens and ducks and, fruit trees, and we're the only citrus growers in Idaho. We have big greenhouses filled with citrus and figs. And so I'm learning how to be a farmer this year while I'm building my home. And I feel so relaxed with this lifestyle. And even though the mountains are very relaxing, it's funny, our little town of Sun Valley has become so popular and crowded. And over the 4th of July, I was up there, and it was just so bustling and busy and fun. But I can't wait to get back to the farm. And it's very quiet here, although there's workmen running around doing something all the time.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's very peaceful.
Yeah, and our family, we're in Florida, and
I wondered where you are.
Yeah, and we're trying to kind of create a food forest. We're trying to plant fruit trees, edible plants everywhere, all over our yard. And well, that's another thing that COVID kind of taught a lot of people, is that we kind of need to be able to sustain ourselves. There's talks of food shortages and all this other craziness right now, and it is important to own land and grow food on it.
We're on the same page, because that has been our vision for, like I said, 5 years ago we bought this, and my extended family, we all went in on it together. But some of my family members had this vision of something like what we have been enduring happening. And so we are prepared for that. And we're saving seeds, and we're planting organic vegetables. There's a co-op down here that they are very much in tune with exactly what you're speaking of. And we have hot and cold springs too. So we have our own water, because water is a commodity that is a rare commodity. And right now we're suffering from a drought. And so on a big level, not just Idaho. I mean, it's affecting a lot of places. And so water is so important. And so I totally agree with, if you can find your own little piece of land, and if you can even have water, it's so important.
Yeah. I even talked to another artist about that, because he had ducks, and he was doing permaculture. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are realizing we need to grow our own food. We need to be self-sufficient because right now there's a lot of uncertainty. Yeah, I recommend anyone just start a garden. Not only is it good to grow your own food, organic food, it's good to just be out in nature.
It is, and the cultures that live the longest are always cultures that tend in the dirt. They're digging in the dirt.
Yeah.
And that's a documented fact that the longest lived people garden and grow their own food. And so there are definite health benefits to it.
Yeah.
And I can tell just living here, I feel much more relaxed. I'm excited to get back to Sun Valley, but I'm going to definitely have more balance because even though I live in the mountains up there, I get caught up in the hustle bustle of my little town and running errands and being busy on the computer. And that's another thing is getting outside away from technology. I've been a big social media person for many years and a big proponent of the benefits of social media. I've gotten a bit turned off of social media this last year. Definitely. It doesn't matter if you're which side of the fence you're on. It's been a total turnoff. I don't trust it. I'm still using it, obviously, as a way like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
As in a positive way, to inspire and to help others. And obviously to brand and promote our businesses and well-being and that sort of thing. That's fabulous. But there's a dark side to it that I really don't like. And sometimes I feel like getting off of the whole thing. But I think I'm going to look toward the good side of it and use it that way.
Yeah, I
so
also
tangent.
Yeah, I also always tell people turn off that TV. It's not making your life better.
No, it really doesn't. And it zaps your energy. And, we need to get up and move around. Being a sedentary person isn't good for any of us. And social media has been a great way for us to connect, especially during the lockdowns, and the Zoom meetings like we're having right now have been a fabulous way for families to connect and friends to stay in touch. And so I've been pretty lucky living where I live. The pandemic, we were a hot spot when it started. And in fact, we all had COVID up in my area. We were one of the first places in per capita. We had the highest COVID cases, and we all did really darn well, got through it, and pretty much lived our lives fairly normally ever since. So, but I know that it's been really hard on the global community, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we should go back a bit more to the painting side of things. It's interesting because when I was going through your gallery on your website, I saw a section called Encaustic painting.
Yes.
And I had actually never heard of encaustic painting until now. Somehow it went under my radar. But yeah, I looked it up and, it's encaustic wax painting. And I thought it was so interesting that I never heard of it. And it's a really interesting medium. So I would like to ask a bit about if you can explain to people what it is exactly and, how the techniques there kind of differ. Everyone knows about, oil, acrylic, watercolor. But yeah, what is encaustic wax painting?
Oh, good. That's fun. Encaustic is a very ancient, one of the first painting mediums. And it is where you work with hot wax and pigment. And back 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, it dates back. The Egyptians would paint on the sarcophaguses. Is that how you say that? They would paint a likeness of their loved one, and so there's some of the oldest known artworks are encaustic, and it's hot wax that encaustic is Greek, I believe, and means to burn in. And so you melt wax, and I have a wax station right behind me, but instead of putting out piles of paint, you melt piles of wax in little cups, different colors, And then you use special brushes. They need to be natural brushes, or synthetics will melt into the wax. So you want to use like hog hair or something stiff. And then you paint with it just like you do, well, not just like, but similarly to regular painting. And that's your palette. And then to get it to flow, you use some kind of heat, and you can use an iron, blowtorch, which I use quite a bit, an air gun, like a hair dryer, but more powerful than that they use in construction. And then that melts the wax, and you keep it moving. But the one thing about it, it's very difficult to control. And it's also toxic at certain degrees. So you want to keep it, I can't remember, the 260 degrees, something like that. And I have a thermometer that I keep to make sure that I don't get above that, because it off gases. So for the most part in my life, I strive to be solvent free, but I do love painting with encaustic so much. I mean, as kids, do you remember playing with wax candles and you kind of drip it on your finger? And it just feels so tactile and warm and smells so good. And it's much like that, but there is a toxic side to it when it gets too hot. So you do need to have good venting. And then once the wax dries and cures, it takes a little bit to become totally solid, but then you need to protect it just like
I was wondering about that.
I'm sorry, someone's calling me. Sorry about this.
No problem.
Okay. I have it on mute, but that was my iPad ringing. Anyway, you need to protect it from the elements just like you would a puppy or a child. You don't leave it in your car above. So it does okay you don't want to get below freezing because it'll crack, and you don't want to get probably above 95 degrees because it'll start to get hot and melt. So those are the main considerations. And other than that, it is a very sturdy medium, and it's so beautiful. It's very translucent.
I've seen them. I mean, it's very cool how, I mean, you can tell there's kind of this soft glow to almost how everything looks. It's really interesting.
Yes. And on my website, you can see some of my examples of encaustic, and it's very unique. And although it's very ancient, and it's been rediscovered over the past couple decades, and it's been especially popular over the last 10 years, I'd say. It's kind of had a resurgence in popularity.
Who introduced you to the medium?
Oh, you know what? I saw Christopher Riley's work. I had heard about encaustic in college with art history, but I didn't have any context. It didn't mean anything to me. I never saw it in person. And then locally up at Gail Severin Gallery years back, probably 20 years ago, an artist, Christopher Riley, who's a contemporary encaustic artist, had an exhibition. I fell in love with his work. In fact, I have a piece right above me right here. I could pull it down and show everybody.
If it's not too much trouble.
It's right here. Just bear with me. Excuse me. I have one of his pieces. And by the way, artists do buy art, so don't discount that.
I don't know if we're going to be able to see it.
That's so. Oh wait.
Yep, it might come into view. There we go.
Okay, wait, where was it? Let me get back here. Well, you got a glimpse.
Yeah.
I don't know if
very
you can
nice.
see. It's just, I love botanicals and nature and that sort of thing, and that's what that subject is. But you can kind of see the beauty of it just in a quick glimpse.
Yeah.
But anyway, that captured my attention, and I started thinking, gosh, I wonder if I could do something with that medium. And so I gave it a try, and I had such success right away that my work, within the first year, I had a couple of shows and sold things and almost sold them out, and ended up in the Encaustic Museum of Art in Santa Fe right away. So And I think it's because I did birds and do birds, but it was rather unique at the time. And I came up with, I think all my years of oil painting, I was able to incorporate some of those techniques sort of, but it is much different. You cannot have the refinement. You have to surrender to the medium and be open to happy accidents, which at that time in my life, it was a really good thing for me to kind of release control. And because I have a tendency to be very detailed, coming from being a wildlife artist, I'm very detailed. So it was really neat, and it has affected my oil painting for the better as well. I'm always working to loosen up.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of like exhibits, I'm interested in knowing what your experience has been getting your art into an exhibit. I know it can be a very difficult road, for artists to get their art into an exhibit. So I'm just interested in knowing, what was your first experience like, trying to get your art into an exhibit, and how has it been since?
Oh, that's a good question. I've written about this quite a bit on my blog, which it was finearttips.com. And as you mentioned earlier, I wrote a book by the same title, Fine Art Tips, a Northlight book. And I share some of those business tips. Now you could still Google Fine Art Tips and find it, but I go by LoriMcNee.com. Just it got too much to have two blogs going on, so I funnel it all in together. But anyway, I share about how my own personal story, how I got into the gallery world and exhibiting professionally. And I have I have little steps that I share. But personally, I started way back when I was that wildlife artist and kids at home. I would enter some competitions, and no matter what style of art you have, nowadays there's usually some kind of juried competition that you can use as a goal to get your work out there. And they're unnerving. I mean, I've had more rejection than success.
Yes.
And I think almost any professional artist you speak with, unless they're a total prodigy, will experience more rejection than success. And still to this day, there's many times that I'm not accepted things that I strive for. But instead of it hurting my ego, I kind of look at it as, okay, first of all, art is subjective. So sometimes it's political, and sometimes it's because maybe your work wasn't right for the competition or the exhibition. And other times it might not be their taste, or maybe you're not quite good enough too. And maybe you're being a little premature. But that's how I started out, was duck stamps and trout stamps and that sort of thing in the wildlife world. So no matter what genre you're painting, Juried Art Services is a good website to get on, because they now send out announcements of all different types of art competitions and things. And that's kind of a fun way to get started, to get your name out there, kind of get a feel for how you're doing, and just get the lay of the land out there. But another thing to do is, if you're working toward getting a gallery, but you're not quite ready, I always say it's really important to have a body of work, a cohesive body of work, which at least 5 paintings that relate to each other. Maybe they're all framed alike. And I mean, I wouldn't do an abstract painting and a painting of a horse, and and then something an ocean scene. Try and come up with a theme, a series of work of 5 to 10 pieces, and start there. And if you don't feel ready to approach a gallery, I do talk about how to find a gallery, how to find the right gallery on my website. I suggest going to a bank or an interior decorating, interior designer store, a restaurant, consignment stores, places like that might be willing to exhibit your work. And the way I got into the galleries was, I had been doing my wildlife art, and back in the late, well, it was probably right around 2000, I was tired of painting wildlife. I mean, I love wildlife, but I was kind of tired of working from photographs. And so I started to really get back into plein air painting. And I also discovered still life painting, which is where you set up a vase or flowers, kind of like your own little landscape right next to you in your studio, and you control the lighting. And so I started doing still life paintings, and I challenged myself one summer. I read Kevin McPherson's book about plein air painting, and he challenged us, the readers, to painting 100 6x8 paintings. And I did that one summer while my kids were in soccer and ice skating and that sort of thing. I bring my paints with me, and while they're practicing, I do a quick little 6x8 painting. And at the end of summer, I had almost 100 paintings. And a friend of mine who owned a consignment store came over to my house, and we were just visiting, and she happened to see my art. She said, "Wow, Lori, these are really good." And I said, "Thanks." And she said, "Would you like to show them in my store? I don't have anything on the walls. I have all these pretty clothes and furniture, but I have nothing on the walls." And I said, "Sure." So I framed them up, and I hung the best, not all the 100, but I probably hung about 30 paintings, and that most of them were plein air, and I had a couple still life paintings, and everything sold. And while they were hanging there, I decided to walk down to my neighboring gallery, and I walked in and said, "Hey, you know what? I'm Lori McNee. I'm an artist, and I just had a sellout show down the road, and I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind coming and taking a look before all the paintings go to their new homes." And she came in there and she said, "Wow, I really like these, and I'd love to represent you." And that's how my gallery relationship began with Neeland Gallery, which still to this day is a very important gallery in my life. And in fact, I have a show with them in a month. But that's how I got into the gallery business. So it's thinking outside the box. It's learning how to sell yourself a little bit, putting yourself out there. That's worked out really well for me.
Yeah. And, networking with the locals, that's actually pretty important. Like even this podcast, I'm kind of doing a way of networking between artists from all around the world, and I'm doing it locally as well. It's a great way to just get yourself out there, connect with other people. That's ultimately where you're going to find a lot of success, is just by talking with people, meeting up with people who have ideas, and you can share those ideas. It's important to create community around yourself.
Absolutely. And that's what we do with social media and with our blogs and that sort of thing. And that is, that's why they're such a valuable tool. And I do agree with having your local community support you. But I do also, I will say that sometimes local artists are much overlooked in their own community, and they're taken for granted, so to speak. And sometimes, especially in my community, many local artists are not gallery represented in our own community. And so I'm not saying that our community doesn't support the local arts. They do, but a little differently. So that's something to bear in mind as well. And sometimes you might have good luck in a neighboring town. So, but I do agree with having open studios and introducing your art to your community. Usually patrons get very excited, your friends and local restaurants and things will be very excited and support you. But galleries, for some reason, oftentimes, not always, I'm not wanting to offend any galleries out there, I'm very grateful to you, but oftentimes there's a little bit more of a mystique they build with going outside of their community and bringing someone in rather than just grassroots.
Yeah. All right. Well, I do want to ask a bit about, because you're an art educator as well.
Yes.
And I was looking on your website. So you have like a workshop in Greece and Africa next year, assuming, COVID permits.
Yes.
But I think that's really interesting. A lot of artists, I think, wish they could, travel the world and go to these amazing places and paint and teach people. I think a lot of people would love to do that. How did you get this opportunity to travel and paint? I think a lot of artists are, as you know, the starving artist mindset.
Yeah.
They're struggling to even just be an artist. How did you get to this place where you can travel the world and paint?
Well, and that's an interesting question. And I do my best to not have the starving artist mentality. I believe in abundance and positivity.
Yeah,
And as woo woo as that sounds, I really, it works well in my life. And
yeah,
of course, we all have struggles. And like I said, I've dealt with a lot of rejection personally and professionally. And instead of letting it get me down and start thinking I'm not good enough, or what am I going to do? When am I going to sell a painting? It kind of empowers me and makes me know and strive even more. And so as far as teaching goes, I started locally. I started teaching plein air workshops. Well, I'll back it up by also saying I'm an educator online, again, with Fine Art Tips,
yeah,
LoriMcNee.com. I share my art tips and became an authority on social media. And I've been on Twitter since 2009, an early adopter. And within the first year, I became one of the top 100 women in the world on Twitter and I held that position for quite a few years until I had to make a decision. Am I going to be an artist that tweets, or am I going to be a social media personality that paints? I mean, so I decided I want to be an artist first and foremost, and then take some time to help others rather than I was going to have to give up my painting career. So because of my social media presence, I was asked to teach locally. People were requesting. My local art center in town asked me to teach. And so I started again locally, plein air painting, teaching, and still life also indoors, which attract a couple different crowds. And so I started that way. And then I was giving keynote speeches around the country with different art organizations about the art business world. And I started getting asked to teach. And one of my biggest coups was I was invited to teach painting in Monet's gardens in France. And that's one of the most magical places that I've led workshops. And I did that for, I think, 5 years. And then COVID hit. And so I haven't done that for a while. But I've just been invited to these amazing places. And I love to travel. And it was kind of my master plan to teach. And it's a lot of work.
yeah,
It's not a free vacation. I mean, I do get my vacation paid for because I'm teaching, but it is a lot of work. And
yeah.
but I love it. And I teach in Italy and in France, and I've taught in Spain, and then I was supposed to have taught in South Africa during COVID, and that got tabled. And then we were supposed to go this year, and now we've pushed it back to 2022. But that is booked. It's as ironically as it sounds, I could have sold that 3 times over. I have a wait list on that one. And I just recently announced Greece. And so we'll be going to Greece, and I still have some spots left in my Grecian workshop in 2022 April. So, and those are all on my website.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I would love to travel more, just especially with COVID, right now is not, maybe isn't necessarily the best time to be traveling places, but definitely it's something that we would like to do in the future.
Definitely. So I'm hopeful that things will be smoothing out by then.
Yeah.
But it's just a great way. I love immersing my students in some of the culture. Yes, we're painting.
Yeah.
I have some professional artists that join me, and I do everyone from total beginner to advanced or professional, because it's a well-rounded experience. We get out and we go to the farmers markets, and we have time to eat the the local foods and explore, and then also paint, and then photography too. I love photography. So you're kind of there for at least a week to 10 days, immersing yourself into a place that is so unlike where you live.
Yeah.
And it's a very unique experience.
Yeah, it's great to immerse yourself into another culture.
It really is. And I love it. I love seeing the diversity of our beautiful world and meeting people. And the more you travel, the more you realize that we're so much the same.
Yeah.
And I love our differences, and I love our commonality, um, and I love meeting people from all over, and art is a universal language, and people speak English so well usually around the world, but there are pockets where you meet people and they don't speak English, but they understand art, and you can have a warm conversation with someone without really speaking words, just looking at art and nice gestures.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll probably start. We'll start closing up soon.
Oh.
But definitely, I want to shout out to Terry Nakamura, because she brought attention to me about you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you
Great.
know Terry?
Oh, Terry's one of my best and longest online friends. And we met on Twitter. And back in the day when people made fun of us for tweeting, I mean, I got ridiculed for years about that. And she's an art person as well. She's more of a designer, and she's so talented. But we became friends online. And then I had an opportunity to meet her in real life years back as I was traveling through Seattle, where she lives in the Seattle area. And we just had an instant connection in person, just like online. And we've seen each other in real life many times since, and traveled together. And we stay in touch and talk on the phone probably once a month at least, and almost daily online. So she's a very talented gal, and she's coming out with a new book, blogging on Instagram, which she offered me to an opportunity to write a little section of that, which I did. And so I'm thrilled to be a part of that project. And I think it's going to be a big success and a lot of help to others.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had her on my show a few weeks back.
Yes.
So yes, and I was helping to bring more attention to her book there. And it's so cool that, once again, we can meet all these different people online, and then they become friends in real life. That's, it's phenomenal.
It is. It has made the world a smaller place for sure. And and again, going back to COVID and all of that, I think it's just really helped people connect.
Yeah.
And I think that this way of connecting is going to continue because there's so many benefits with it. But it's fun to put a face with a voice more than just a telephone call,
Yeah. This is the usually the final question that I ask people.
Right.
And it is, who inspires you either as a person or creatively?
Oh gosh.
And it can be anyone, and once again, you can categorize that if you want to speak creatively, and then personally, who in your personal life inspires you as a person.
No, that's hard. That's a tough one because I draw inspiration from so many places, and in a spiritual practice as well as artistic and personal. I mean, my parents have been big inspirations in my life, and I love reading. And so there's all kinds of different authors and painters. And really, the Dutch masters really inspired my work. And then the Impressionists, and I love the tonalists. It's been really fun to go to museums when I'm traveling the world and see the artists whose work I've admired for years. Monet, it has had a big impact on me, although I don't really paint like him. I just admire his ingenuity and how much he inspired the world with his beauty through nature and his paintings. And I was in Amsterdam a year and a half or so ago, and I had the opportunity to go to the Van Gogh Museum. And I had always liked Van Gogh's work, but I had never seen it in person. And if you ever have an opportunity to go to that museum, I highly recommend it. It's actually maybe my favorite museum now. I was just blown away, the way they hang it, and his story and his extreme talent. So I'm a huge Van Gogh fan, and it actually has influenced me. And then there's some current painters now. I'm really enjoying working with a really good painter right now, Michael Workman, who is mentoring me because I'm always stretching and working to grow. And he's a very world-renowned landscape painter, and he's out of Utah, and I'm enjoying working with him. And so I'm, in a nutshell, I mean, it's really hard just to come up with one name. I have a broad, a lot of, I draw inspiration from a lot of sources. But God,
Yeah. Yeah.
very grateful. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, where can people find you?
So you can find me all over the place.
Yeah.
So the best place is to start with my name, LoriMcNee.com. And if that, you don't remember that, if you Google Fine Art Tips, you'll find me there. And on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, I'm behind on YouTube. That's a goal of mine. I teach and sell videos and DVDs. And my book, Fine Art Tips, is still available on Amazon and through like Barnes and Noble and other booksellers. And I think, I'm trying to think where else. My TV show, but you can, LoriMcNee.com is the best way if you really want to see what I'm up to, and find me there. And you can find me on all my social media channels. Instagram.
Yeah. And I saw on your YouTube channel, you have a couple interviews up with different artists as well.
Yes. So during the pandemic, I started that, and really it took off and was very popular. And then I fizzled out because I ended up selling my house and moving, and it just became too much. And so something had to give, and I gave that up. But I'm planning on, I have a couple big shows I'm painting for right now. And once I get through those, I'm going to get back to my interviews because people really enjoyed them.
All right. Well, awesome. This has been great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Avery. I really appreciate it.
Yes, I really enjoyed this, and I'm a huge fan of your work now that I've discovered you. And
thank you.
yeah, and I hope to watch you grow and continue.
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you. You're doing good by interviewing us, and we appreciate it very much. I appreciate it. And I was in Florida just a couple weeks ago. I wonder how close I was to you.
Yeah, we're in upper North Florida.
Okay. All right. So I was in the Keys, which I'd
Yeah.
never been there, and that was fun to experience. So anyway, but thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to anybody that watched this.
Yes, this has been great.
And I'll see you online.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you again, Lori. This has been great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.